All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our final webinar for the out of school or the school year in our ongoing behavioral health series, where we aim to provide you with strategies and tools to help address concerns around youth mental health. We know all of you witness firsthand the children and youth who are struggling with sadness and hopelessness right now, and we hope today with a few more tools to help you tackle these mental health challenges. My name is Sarah Bangert, and I'm with the Out of School Time Alliance, a program of Marshfield Clinic Health System Center for Community Health Advancement, and I will be facilitating the webinar today. This series is made possible through a partnership with Out of School Time Alliance and the Wisconsin Department of Children and Families, and we wouldn't be here today without the support and expertise of Marshfield Clinic's behavioral health team. Before we start, we just want to remind everyone to keep your microphones on mute. If you want to ask questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and I will monitor them as they come in. It's also helpful to note that this webinar will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel within a couple of weeks, where you will be able to revisit the content or invite others to join in the conversation. We also will invite you to participate in a 5-question survey at the end of the webinar, where you can give us feedback. We appreciate you taking the time to do this so we can adapt our resources to best meet your needs. With all the logistics aside, I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Jacob Dieselman, clinic and health psychologist with Marshfield Clinic Health System. Okay. Dr. Dieselman attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison Department of Counseling and Psychology, did his internship at Syracuse Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Syracuse, New York, fellowship at Marshfield Clinic Adult Psychology Fellow, and his current position is a staff psychologist in adult services and faculty psychologist. His professional activities include working out of the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Health. He's engaged in the following activities: outpatient assessment, consultation, outpatient psychotherapy, and testing health psychology and the integration of behavioral health and primary care and specialty medicine, and teaching and supervision of postdoctoral psychology fellows and medical resident training. His professional societies include Society of Counseling and Psychology, Society of Advancement of Psychotherapy, Society of Health Psychology, National Register of Health Service, psychologist, and his professional interest in post-traumatic stress and trauma recovery, depression, anxiety disorders, in-depth diagnostic and assessment services, primary care, behavioral health integration, transgender, and gender diverse services. I hope I got it all correct, Dr. Dieselman.
Yeah, I never know what to offer for a bio. It's whatever.
That's okay. You can jump in after we get started here. So welcome, Dr. Dieselman.
All right, that now. Okay. Maybe Sarah or anybody. Am I clear? I'm not too upset. You were going in and out on my end, Sarah. Are people able to hear me consistently? Because that would change. Maybe I'll get a speaker or something. Am I having any volume issues?
You're super clear, Dr. Dieselman.
Okay.
It's probably just me.
Again, I'm not critiquing you at all. I just want to make sure I don't just keep rambling and people are like, I missed half of that. So and then my other silly question was, how long do I have?
You have till 1 o'clock.
Okay, good. I was like, I think it's till 1 o'clock. Good. That's what I planned for. As was mentioned, this is going to be, it's recorded, and hopefully too, I can be able to provide you all, or CCHA can provide you all with the materials I have, because there's a lot of stuff that we're going to touch on, and there's a lot of stuff that's much deeper, and there's just no way to do both in a useful way. And so if this can be a repository too, that people come back to, that, whether it's the links I have or some of the materials that can, keep the conversations going for you all. And first and foremost, aside from all the bullet points, my name and contact information, in case anybody has things they want to follow up specifically with, or questions or whatever. I'm always more than happy to have a discussion and dialogue about whatever, really, this included and specifically. So of course, what I ended up developing for a description was, an overview of engagement considerations for transgender and gender diverse youth, important uh, psychological and political aspects for working with this population. I was like, wow, I couldn't have made that more broad. And that's like, whoa. So hopefully I can do a decent job at least starting us off. And then, of course, if there's really important, interesting, whatever, interrupt me the best you can. I think the chat's being monitored, and I'd rather take some time to get into some specific questions or things that people have than, again, to let me ramble forever and ever and ever. So yeah, with that being said, what, don't freeze on me. There. There's a standard thing. I wish I had a disclosure to share. I'd make no money from this or other related things, and someday maybe I'll get a lucky opportunity to say that I have a conflict or financial interest or something, but not today. So this outline is brief. It's reasonable, but I want to go over some concepts, some organizations, some foundational materials that you all can use in the future. Things around languaging, verbiage, pronouns, things around definitional, and sort of stuff we can use as our springboard when we work with any youth in whatever capacities we all work with. I'm just going to use a word like helper, but I know these are, we all have different kind of roles and backgrounds here. I use the word helper, teacher, staff, whatever. I do want to get into a little bit of like why there's some political, what's the big deal, what's happening, and then what your role can be as a helper, as a touch point for this population and this youth that can feel marginalized and definitely has vulnerabilities. And then talking a little bit about some services we offer at Marshfield Clinic and elsewhere, again, to provide more follow-up and help with whatever people's needs, specifically in their role or with certain youth may be. Cool. So this was one of the things that I'm like, okay, I could show this or I couldn't show this. Here's one of the first slides. And links that if you all get this, like, I wouldn't expect someone to type this in or whatever, but I'm also not going to show this. It's relatively long, but it's a really cool thing about personal, political, about the role of allies, the role of us, and how we intersect with the people that we are there to serve, help, and in our various roles. And so this is Dr. Ami Asun Jones, and I think she's still at the University of Austin, Texas. And it's just a really good video. Sort of, it's not meant to be crazy like cheerleading, but it is pretty emotional, pretty rousing, and it kind of talks about what it means to be an ally. Now, she speaks of this from various intersectionalities, which I'll talk about that in a minute. But it applies to any group that we help, and that there might be some vulnerabilities. She speaks to it from racial, ethnic, but she also talks about gender, about other diversities that come up. And yeah, I didn't want to spend, it's like a 12, 13-minute video. That seemed like overkill, but it's a really cool video. And it can be a way to maybe sometimes frame your own, I don't know, outlook and perspective of why we advocate and are allies with people. And then I extend, we hear words like ally, advocate. There's a current phrase out there, accomplice, that might sound slightly the legal word, but these are all ways that we align ourselves to help those that we want to serve and provide whatever safe, good learning space that we have. So yeah, hopefully you all can get this and watch this on your own time. So some basic stuff that I might know, but definitely is worth using at the beginning here. The idea transgender. A person's gender identity does not match their assigned sex at birth. Transgender. Cisgender. A person whose identity and expresses a gender that is consistent with culture-defined norms of the sex they were assigned at birth. And then I said this earlier, intersectionality. It's the idea that multiple aspects of a person's identity interact, combined to affect their lives, to make that person uniquely, not just an additive combination, but something different from the sum of their parts. You know, other. Hopefully, you don't see those things pop up. Maybe you do. With this, wait a minute. I got to move your faces out of my way. I can't see. There we go. And then, of course, at the bottom, there's the LGBTQIA plus idea, which I'm sure we've all seen and had some familiarity with. And so these are just some foundational ideas, terms, and like to at least make sure that people understand these identities aren't all the same. They're not always in congruence. There's where the aspects of gender diversity come in, which leads us to, too far. Sorry, there we go. This is about as probably clinical the next few slides that I want to be, as my role as a behavioral health provider psychologist. Just got done talking about transgender, cisgender, and then the term just gender dysphoria. That is the diagnostic label, which comes with criteria on what someone could be experiencing due to a gender identity, distress and impairment, meaning distress that would stem from an incongruence between one's expressed and experienced gender and the sex assigned at birth. And then impairment is, peer, family, relationship, school, work, other aspects of their life, where the incongruence between those identities cause assigned as sex at birth and gender identity cause some sort of impairment. And so previously, the term was gender identity disorder. Now it's called gender dysphoria. I could imagine that this is going to change from a technical standpoint based on societal understandings and acceptance as well. We tend to not want to use gender identity disorder because it's more stigmatizing. Again, one thing you're going to hear throughout the presentation is this is information, this is knowledge, this is not today or in the future really something you get tested and passed. It's not you're not perfect. We're here to help. We're here to try. We're here to do our best. Knowledge is power, but knowledge does not mean you have to bludgeon yourself into perfection with it. So it's a historical, it's a current state of things. It's something that I'm sure will change as society changes. So like I said, I'm gonna wait a minute. They were supposed to be, maybe I took it out. Huh. I thought, interesting. There was gonna be a slide that went through what that means to be incongruent from a criteria standpoint, mental health wise. The bottom line is that incongruence between one's experienced inner and or expressed gender and their assigned sex, is what we're looking for. And the incongruence, it's not that it has to be binary, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's an incongruence between one's experienced expressed gender and or the secondary sex characteristics the person might be developing from a biological standpoint. It has to include a strong desire to be rid of these primary or secondary sex characteristics because of a marked incongruence with one's desired gender expression, and that the desire to do something different, opposite on that spectrum, is what causes that conflict and causes that distress. Again, being careful that we're not working necessarily on the binary, but that we're looking at a spectrum, which I'll talk about in a minute. That there's a desire to be of another alternative gender from one's designated gender, a strong desire to be treated as an other non-assigned gender from birth, and a strong conviction that one has the typical feelings, reactions, and other gender norms different from the one assigned at birth, and that that it comes with that clinically significant distress and impairment. If people have questions about the differential piece, we can talk about that a lot. I wanted to just kind of highlight that. And this leads then into these aspects of languaging, verbiage, pronouns, places and organizations that set these standards, that do the research, that help inform us. I kind of just went through the DSM criteria. We have this thing called WPATH. It's online. I have links to it. World Professional Association of Transgender Health. You have a version 8 and a version 7. Version 7 is actually easier to read. Version 8 is just updated, but terribly formatted. So I give people both as a reference point. And what I'm getting at here is these are the things that help us understand and work with the current evidence and knowledge base. And there's a link on this slide again, which we won't go over because again, it's an hour, which would be ridiculous. But it's a really cool training that I sat in, literally about pronouns. And I was like, wow, how can you talk an hour about pronouns? Amazing, wonderful. Can't remember if it was DHS or what Wisconsin-based organization did it, but it was great. And if you're open, if you want to just dig into the concept, it's worth the hour of your time. Again, if you're already kind of like, yeah, this makes sense. I understand pronouns. I don't worry about it. It's probably worth your time. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So I wanted to give that as another resource. So yeah, again, some information for y'all about transgender and gender diverse youth. I'll read this, but I won't linger too long. When we talk about prevalence, these things are probably underreported, but it's not like there's a concept floating around right now, rapid onset gender dysphoria. And again, if anyone has thoughts about that, I can go into it, but it's not this thing that is new. It's been there. We have different labels. We have different ways of noticing. And from our best descriptive statistics, it's probably between 0.5% to 2%. Here it says 0.6% gender nonconforming, gender diverse. It says youth have higher rates of internalizing issues that come along with the distress of dysphoria, depression, anxiety, suicidality. And then people in this category have endorsed at least one lifetime suicide attempt. Essentially, one thing we can say too, epidemiologically speaking, is that, well, the incongruences, the differences, the diversity that are present from youth to adolescents to adults is real. What we see is the younger someone is and expresses these things, the less robust that these things persist. Again, you can find this information in some of these links I can give you, the WPATH and those standards of care. What I mean by that is a young person, and I've met several people who've said from age 5, they knew that they were different from what was expected, and they did persist. But we see the earlier people identify and express and share these things, the less probability that it will persist into a trans or significant gender diverse identity. The later in life that these still have these feelings, thoughts, and incongruences, the more robust it is. So what would that mean by that for you all is when you're with a young person, a middle schooler versus a high schooler, when you're with someone in grade school versus someone who's at the end of their high school career, and what they're sharing and how they're talking about it. Again, you're not predicting, you're not having them say this is right, wrong, set in stone, but it can help you kind of go, okay, we meet them where they're at, and it has different developmental aspects. Again, what we see is that the younger the people are who express some of this, the lower the persistence rate is, the older they are, and they're expressing this, the higher that persistence is into an adulthood, where we tend to not see, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, detransitioning or reversing of these things. So I thought that was an interesting point for you all to think and take away from this. Again, the developmental aspects, and then the intersection of gender identity and gender expression. Again, the idea of intersectionality, and you all probably have a really decent foundation in general child and developmental trajectory and developmental learning and things like that. So now you can add these information into that same knowledge base that you already most likely possess. Again, this shouldn't be a shock to many people. It is really important to point out gender diverse, and here it just says transgender identities, but gender diverse and transgender identities, oh no, and I have it right there, do not constitute a mental disorder. Gender dysphoria is the label and the distress that we say is, to a level of clinical significance. You can be trans and in an ideal world probably wouldn't have any dysphoria because you can transition without that extra stuff. That's an ideal world. That's difficult. That's not always the case. Again, variations on gender identity and expression are normal aspects of human diversity. Binary is just not set in stone. It's just not a either or whole. There's lots in between. We'll get there in a little bit. This is an interplay of biology, development, socialization, culture. If mental health issues exists, a lot of it does stem from the stigma and negative experiences rather than intrinsically to the youth, to the child, with a grain of salt. It can be both. It can be one. It can be the other. It can be an interplay. I like to think of this sort of idea of mental health is gender diverse trans people are what they are. The idea of dysphoria is the distress that comes from that incongruence. There can also be the distress about being different that is less internal and more something they feel externally, potentially. And then there's the general distress that people have, general anxieties, depressions, and those things. And all three of these levels can interact, amplify, mediate, or lessen one or the other. So again, just because someone's different doesn't mean that they're going to be having a pathological problem. And because people are different, there's often these comorbid associated things due to those levels and interactions that society, community, and the world bring to all of us. So as I continue, it kind of just hammers home that point. Being transgender or gender variant implies no impairment in judgment, stability, reliability, or general social or vocational capacities, capabilities. However, these individuals often experience discrimination due to lack of, rights protections on their expression and their identity. And such discrimination and lack of equal civic rights is damaging to mental health of transgender and gender variant people, the same way it would be for anyone else that experiences any discrimination and lack of rights and opportunities. That's kind of just summing it up as a whole. There is some specific things around transgender youth and mental health implications, rejection, isolation, whether it's from the home, from the community, from the school, from whoever, that clearly is a determinant of physical and emotional well-being. And there, like I said, higher rates of homelessness, violence, substance use, and risky behaviors generally, and sexual behaviors. Again, so not the cause of, but related to, and these are things that you all can think about and watch for when you're working with the various youth populations and settings that you all are in. Again, not because someone who's identified as transgender and or gender diverse is inherently these things, it's that intersection. So before I move on to the next piece, are there questions? I see the chat, but I don't want to like steamroll, or I don't know. I'm going to pause and figure out if I need to review something, slow down, answer something specifically. I can click on this chat bubble. Oh, okay. You put these things in. Oh, cool.
Yes, thank you, Anna. She put the links in for us, so thank you. But there was no other questions right now.
Okay, perfect. Works for me. So I like doing this, but this was a hard one for me because I don't really know. I understand my audience today, who you all are as a concept, but I don't know why you're showing up today. I didn't really want to ask each of you on the spot, like where you at. So again, I don't want to speak to the what do you call the lowest common denominator. That's kind of mean, right? I don't mean that in a mean way, but I also don't want to speak over your heads. And so I just think it's an interesting thing that I like to do with people. If you're here, you're probably open, you're probably wanting to learn, you're probably doing something where you're not just gonna put me on mute and do emails, I guess. So I tend to do this thing with groups to kind of go, okay, we've kind of gone through gender uh diverse and trans pieces a little bit, distress, incongruence, some correlates and outcomes with mental and general health. So again, perspective, insight, maybe get that empathy, that direct empathy, that way you understand who you're with on a daily, these youth and kids that we work with. Um, Again, how to dysphoria. Um, what does that mean? Forget the gender part for now. Dysphoria is a state of unease and or generalized dissatisfaction with life. I mean, that's from the dictionary, just so you know. That's not like I didn't make that up, and it wasn't clear. It was just a state of unease and generalized dissatisfaction with life. So, of course, gender dysphoria is that incongruence again, expression versus assigned a gender, expression and identity versus assigned gender based on, again, we'll talk about this in a moment, more sex and phenotypical and genetic hormonal based things. And so what I like to talk about is dysphoria and incongruence, not just gender related. And so I'm going, oh, okay. So there's probably a time you and one of your identities, gender, um, race, ethnicity, social class, where you felt out of place, wrong, incongruent, wasn't matching where you were. It can be as simple as, oh crap, I'm in the visiting section of the team I'm cheering for. I know it's not a crazy identity like that's deep, perhaps. Or again, social class, like I'm underdressed and I feel like I'm not measuring up to the way I'm supposed to be. And you probably felt off, wrong, maybe not too internalized bad, but self-conscious or awkward. And so if that can happen to most of us at some point in our lives, and I guarantee it has if you let yourself just think about it, um, knowing that gender and sex, knowing that gender expression and identity and biological markers aren't always incongruent. Now it goes, oh, I can kind of get it directly how that might feel. Again, I'm always really cautious because like we don't pretend to know what people are thinking and feeling in a pompous or assumptive way. And it's really important that we try to put ourselves in other people's shoes through their perspective, and this is a way to start to do that for yourself. Because like for me, and I'll share, I am very cisgendered in every idea of my expression and identity and assigned gender and sex and hormones and biology are pretty much in congruence with each other. I mean, again, nothing perfect, but I go, I don't really mind, it's not me. But I also know how to empathize, how to connect, and this helps me not go like, oh, what's wrong with you? Just no, it helps me go, oh, I know what incongruence feels like. I know what dysphoria feels like generally. So, it could happen along these gender lines. So yeah, gender, gender dysphoria isn't a strange concept if you kind of break it down that way. And here's one of the things you've all maybe seen, maybe not. Again, I don't want to assume. I don't want to not assume. The genderbread person. This is a gender unicorn. They're selling the same stuff. Kind of depends which one you want to use. But what we're talking here then is identity, expression, biological sex, sexual orientation. These are all, and there's probably even some more that people might specifically hold idiosyncratically for themselves, parts of themselves that aren't just one or zero, X and O, on and off. It's a spectrum. And, gender, identity, woman, man, if our two poles, but, it doesn't even need to be that. This one has more of a binary to it. Does the other one have? Yeah, less of a binary to a gender identity. Um, Expression, of course. Um, Again, over time too. What used to be feminine, what used to be masculine might not be in the future. I don't know. And then there's sex, which is what we think of more genetically or chromosomally. Again, not as binary as you might imagine, which I'll talk about a little more in a moment. Um, Physical attraction, emotional attraction. Again, on this slide, we have biological sex, we have sexual orientation. These are all parts of this of a person, a gender bred person, or a gender unicorn. So again, when we talk about incongruence, you see the many iterations of how these things can, again, not that you always are striving for congruence, but when things are definitely non-congruent, how there can be then distress, how there can be challenge and conflict internally and externally. There's a lot of levers here, a lot of ways for this to go up and down, and for these not to always work in unison in a way that would be helpful for the youth, the person that we're with. And this is probably the last little bit of the next slide. There we go. The last little bit of I don't know, again, information. I'm certainly not an expert on biological sex. Like I'm a psychologist. That's silly. But I do have an ability to hopefully share some information. And again, just thinking about the layers and the machinations here of how people are coming to us. Wait a minute. I understand congruence. Wait a minute. I understand dysphoria and incongruence and conflict. But can sex, and forget the identity part and the gender expression, is sex really biological sex? Isn't that a thing that's like 1 and 0, black and white? And even that really isn't. Um, we think of chromosomes and that 23rd pair. And again, I'm not a biologist, so I've learned this, and I'll repeat this, and you go search for it yourself and make sure you know I'm right. Even though we think of that 23rd pair, it's really, there's a gene on there that is associated with, it's the SRY gene, makes someone genetically male. But sometimes that's not on the right chromosome. It's on the X chromosome, it's on the Y chromosome. There's also people who have XXY or a fragile Y, and it's not as straightforward. And so, what happens if that chromosomal part of the Y is on the X? Or if someone's XX has part of that on it? Are they not genetically male or female? It's something different. So you might go, oh, well, wait, well, hormones, and then we start getting into some stuff I'll talk about in a little bit, with political pieces and societal understandings. But isn't it hormones, right? What we like to talk about is that what it means to be normal level of male hormones and normal level of female hormones isn't really a normal. The point is, it's empirically shown that there is a bell curve. There are these standard kind of things, but there's always going to be a proportion of males who are in the range that look more feminine on paper, on this genetic, on this hormonal side, and there's going to be a proportion of women, biologically speaking, whose hormones are in that male normative range. So what the hell? That can't be. Wait a minute. So genes, hormones have a lot of variability. So that's already starting to be confusing. Well, then it's, obviously then there's phenotype, there's those things. There's just so many machinations. And the bottom line is a person can be genetically male or female, chromosomally male or female, hormonally male or female, non-binary, also in all that, can have a body that looks one way, 5 ways, whatever. It's complicated. That's the bottom line. So being kind and respectful is not. That's something that we can all do without having to question, prove, have to have these things that maybe sometimes we fall into on accident, or maybe based on some, pre bias or something that was more individual to us. I actually took this from somebody else who was talking about, they're more of a biologist, and they're like, yeah, I don't do this with my freshman biology class in college, looking at their hormone, their chromosomes, their genes, their hormones. That's not the time for someone to be thrown into a loop with their identity when these go, oh, I didn't think I was what I was. Oh, and that's not the point of freshman biology. It's complicated, but being kind isn't. Being understanding, seeing things through people's eyes, and doing what's right is something that we can all do without having to get in arguments and those kind of things. So I'll go back for a moment. We talked about biological sex. We talked about hormones. We talked about dysphoria. We talked about incongruence. Any thoughts? Any questions? Anything we need to hash through, or any questions or thoughts that people want to share? And if not, then it's okay. All right. So it's not like a hard 180, but if the first part was kind of more of like, let's set the stage, let's talk about some of these ideas of the trans and gender diverse people are and what they bring and how we understand them, then we're going to have the next part of my way too big again. What a topic area I picked again, that psychological and political aspects, the way this intersects with our world and our community. And again, maybe some of you all have had some direct experience. Maybe you have questions about what to do, what not to do. I just put a few other things like, what's the big deal? I use this little picture from The Simpsons, and hopefully y'all have some reference point to that, which is a hilarious running gag they have from this particular character. Things like parental rights, fairness in sports, detransitioning. A couple of things I didn't list, but again, I said one of them earlier, this rapid onset gender dysphoria. There's also a term called autogynephilia. If anyone wants to know more about that, I can go into each of those. And again, I'll talk through these right now. Again, I'm asking for maybe participation that no one wants to give. Has anyone encountered anything on this intersection of the person, the student, the youth, and then this societal pushback, this parental rights, this anger that people have been having more politically, more societally, that maybe we want to talk more about, that maybe fit one of these? Does anyone have any examples or things that's come up for them?
Hey, Jacob, this is Andy Gussert. I'm going to throw out a really tough issue.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it while understanding I'm even scared to talk about it sometimes. I never want to say the wrong thing or give the wrong impression. I'm an ally in all of this and have been for a long time. I'm state director for the Boys and Girls Clubs. I appreciate having this presentation and all of the people that are on it. I just put a link up that says 1 in 4 youth are identifying in some way as LGBT. That's so much more than we saw a few years ago. Many of those youth are going to be in those LGBT categories and probably change throughout their life into different categories. Some of them aren't. Some of them are going to, whatever those choices are. I think one of the struggles that our staff is having, and absolutely a struggle I'm having, is talking with conservative parents or conservative legislators who see numbers like this, see him, her, or she after email prefixes, and they don't do that, and think that we are the cause of youth identifying so much more, that somehow we're making 1 out of 4 kids gay, right?
Yeah.
And let me just add, because I think this is an item I really struggle with. When I was in late grade school, junior high, I was a delinquent. I did everything possible against the norm as I was growing up as from basically 9 through 17. And this wasn't something that was against the norm or even talked about in the late 80s. I'm wondering how we can talk about with people, or if we should even talk about with people, how much of this is the rebellion of youth
Mhm.
where some may used to get a mohawk or do any number of things without diminishing that there are real youth going through this. And I don't want to be the one who has to pick who's who.
Right, right. And so a part of it, and I put the word wedge issue on here, and I was hoping maybe we'd have these discussions. I didn't really know who was going to, what the needs were today, who was present today, what was going to come up. But yeah, that was kind of my prompting, was to kind of, hey, this would be a big one right now, because you nailed it. And that's why I put the word wedge issue. It makes it look like, kind of what we were saying earlier, that this is a binary choice. Either you're affirming or you're somehow oppressing. Either you're causing or you're indoctrinating or you're more traditional. You know, it's making this be a false dichotomy, and that's usually one of the places I start with. And so I didn't exactly know how to put this on a slide, but this slide is probably going to help a little bit. Historically, whether it's gender related things or lots of other things, a lot of care models, whatever. I just put care models. I use this from an old presentation. Um, particularly trans adults, but it was like you had to kind of prove, like, okay, what's going on? Is this true or false? And then you hear this thing called a consent model of care. And I've added a little term, collaborative. And if that helps you go, wait a minute, whether it's conservative or just concerned people who are like, this seems strange and off and different. And I don't know if this is true. And how come you're doing this, whatever? What you're going to tell them is like, wait a minute, you do what you've always done. It's from the ground up. It's about the safety, wellness, and the growth of these youths. So it starts from those basic needs: food, shelter, clothing, hierarchy of needs stuff. It goes to those safety. It goes to the other aspects of growth, development, and actualization, right? And so if someone's going to you saying, "Wait, why do we have a 1 in 4 as opposed to before is 1 in 6 and 1 in 10 or 1 in 20?" And what you're saying is we're meeting them where they're at, but we're also not going to do things that would put them in harm's way. That's that collaborative piece. I put pronouns in front of my name in an email, which I actually don't right now. I don't know why. I think I'm lazy. But it's not because I'm indoctrinating. It's because I'm welcoming, and I'm not trying to alienate people. But I'm also not gonna. If a kid wants to do something, and I don't think it's safe for them, for their peers, with their context, and they say it's due to their gender needs, I'm still not gonna let them do it. I don't care what gender they are. There's developmental age appropriate. That's that collaborative piece. And I think then when we use statistics and we talk about needs and we share these things, you bring in your developmental child development knowledge you already have in the roles you have. You say that's why we're doing this, because the flip side was denying, forcing, and basically invalidating, which we know increases these other problems: suicide, internalization, drug and alcohol use, those kind of things. So we're not here to indoctrinate. We're also not here to ignore. We're here to strike that balance. And that's something that I will say, you might not always hear. It's tough because on the advocate side, these groups and these organizations, whatever they may be, who are like, we need to really affirm. You might hear that as affirming. And I kind of mentioned it in the last bullet point there. You have to affirm at all costs. That's really not true either. You don't think about any child, any youth. You don't just say, "Oh yeah, go for it." No, you're 5 and you're not cooking on the stove without me there. What? No, no, you're 10 and you're not driving. So you wouldn't do this either, based on those things. Now, affirmation and the last bullet point talks about a gender affirmation lifespan approach, which is goes along with gender exploration therapy specifically, is a way to match the needs with the development with the gender pieces to then scaffold them through developmental needs that we all go through. I mean, all of us had to go through identity development period, still are probably. Some of us got lucky enough where I didn't have to explicitly be too thoughtful about this because I kind of fit what was considered normative, mainstream, traditional. Didn't still mean I struggled with who I was. So all we're saying to groups who are concerned about this or have a role of like you're doing too much is we're just not marginalizing people who've otherwise been marginalized. So it's a long answer. It's not always easy, but if a parent, someone comes in and they want to have the discussion, you might, kind of strike this balance, use some of this information from these slides, start to talk about it. And kind of like I said at the beginning, not everyone, in fact, a large amount of people don't persist into something that's considered trans or significantly gender diverse. They just end up being someone who's a tomboy or someone who's just a little different from the classic but still harmful binary gender norms. They're that kind of stuff. And again, you having that language, having this perspective, looking at some of these things, which I'll send out from the evidence base. Again, the WPATH pieces talk a lot about. They have really good sections on adolescent youth. Again, statistics, epidemiology, processes. So you can kind of be not armed. I hate saying that, like it's not a fight, but so you don't feel like you're caught off guard. So you don't feel like you're just having to be like, ugh. Because it goes back to that other slide I said. This stuff's complicated, but being kind is generally not that hard. And most people who have good faith, kindness, and caring, even though they might come from different perspectives, usually can find common ground with this stuff. Usually can work it through. Some people, we know this, don't want to, and we kind of got to figure out how to keep them boundaried and not in harming us and other people. But most people really do figure a way to find that middle ground, that common ground. I'd imagine there's other people who have thoughts or experience with this. Anybody else have anything to add?
Audra just put something incredible in the chat. Thank you for that. And that's probably how the two comments that I would give back after listening is let the person know they've been heard.
Yeah.
And then also share, we're not doing anything different. And that is a common phrase we often use. We're here to make sure kids are safe. We're here to make sure, and I like Audra's language of talking about it being developmentally appropriate.
Yep. I think there's where, unfortunately, there is going to be some, not just wedge issues, but, what do you do when it comes to a sport? What do you do when, people want to bludgeon you with, look at all this detransitioning stuff, or again, this concept of, you mentioned 1 in 4, and then this idea that there's like rapid onset gender dysphoria, social contagion idea, and that being lashed on to, look, it's not real. It's just, kids being youth, adolescent with these things. And again, I think the idea is like when we look and slow down at the data points, when we even go back to that idea, and I'll mention it just so everyone has a sense, you can find this. That whole concept of rapid onset is really shoddy. And I can't quite tell if the person who said it was doing it in jest or was legitimate and didn't realize how it got exploded. And so basically the upshot of that concept was a medical provider who, I forget why she even was dealing with this, but she basically only talked to parents through a website that was, kind of anti-gender diversity, and ask their perspective about the onset of this happening in their children. And so according to the parents, it was fast and they didn't like it. But like, holy crap, a lot of parents don't know what their kids are going through until it's like a big deal, until it's obvious. And so it was really crummy. But then politically, societally, that idea is out of the bag. And there's going to be people who are like, no, this is an onset. This is a contagion, a social thing, not a genuine thing. And now at this point in the Marshfield Clinic, I bet you it's been hundreds, not too many hundreds, but hundreds of people who I've worked with in some capacities for their gender affirming medical cares. And I don't know a single one of them who's like, oh yeah, yesterday it changed. Oh yeah, it was overnight. It was over the weekend. It was after I went to a party or I visited my aunt and all of a sudden I was trans. Like it just haven't happened. So again, that's even one that if you dig into it. Now, of course, this is the question as us as helpers, as us as people who work with youth, it's exhausting to always have to feel like we have to have this defense, this like information at our fingertips. So again, picking your battles, knowing where your supports are, when to de-escalate, when to, I'm not saying ignore, but focusing on what is the core goal of what you're doing. And it's probably not to argue. It's probably not to debate. So then I do bring up then those parental rights and the fairness in sports kind of thing. I think those are really tough because conceptually both of those like go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Why is someone saying what they're saying? again, it's another level of understanding, of digging, of contextualizing. Um, even the examples people might use for the sports ones. I think it was last Olympics, but whether it's college or Olympics, I kind of forgot. There's a woman who's transitioned, um, biologically identified as male, and she ends up winning some sort of accolade, championship, blah blah blah, something like that. And people are like, look how unfair this is. We forget to see that underneath that, this person transitioned into their gender expression, became a swimmer, and sucked for like a long time at swimming, like was terrible at it, like failed. And she learned, like everyone else who became a world-class swimmer, on how to do this. And so it's very little to do with their gender, their biological sex. They had to learn and grow into it. So when you get past the heatedness, often the context is less provocative, um, emotionally triggering than how it's presented. And so there's the rub. There's the difficulty of how do we then, de-escalate, talk with people, and again, it goes back to that kindness, helping, doing no harm kind of thing. You know, these are some links that we can share or whatever. I put you in here. I'm not promoting like Apple TV or or Max, what is it, HBO. And again, not that my political stripes don't show through with these two people, but man, are they good? They are really good. Both of their most recent uh, uh, shows, which are in the last year and a half or 2 years or so, are just really, really good. It's kind of cutting through and just asking questions and being thoughtful and being thorough in how we approach these issues that can otherwise be used again as wedge political things. The John Oliver stuff is free. The Jon Stewart stuff is, you got to have Apple TV. So like I said, they're not paying me to put this in here. So it's not a conflict of interest, but I understand not everyone has. I don't have Apple TV, but and I did want to highlight a little bit too. We are in Wisconsin. These are our context is our current political climate, and we know our current governor is someone who's very much on the large policy side of I don't want to discriminate, put barriers, and be problematic. And then as far as the state legislature has gone, descriptively being more dominated by a Republican Party, even as of last fall, most of their most of their policy platform was this is not a. I mean, essentially, they wrote it in as many words. It's not a winning strategy in the ballot box in Wisconsin. Now, does that mean it's going to change? Does that mean I'm sharing this? I'm editorializing slightly. I'm more or less summarizing. I'm not editorializing too strong. I'm trying to paint the picture of the current climate because other states will have different climates. Because if you go to other states, if we have youth who come from other states, if we don't live in a vacuum, we live in a country, and people do go from Texas to Wisconsin to Oregon to Florida, and each of those are going to be different. And so, at least having some grounding in what's happening in Wisconsin. Again, these are very quick overview, but that's going to be something that I do this in my practice. I have someone come in and we're doing some sort of gender affirming needs based something, and I do talk about the context. I tend to say something to the effect of, Wisconsin is, in terms of structural things, we're far from the worst. We're not the greatest, but we're not the worst. We have some avenue here. And the reason I tell that to people is because sometimes they're coming in pretty catastrophically worried because they read the news. It doesn't apply to them directly today. Now, again, there's a future unknown, but I like to help people and I like to stay up on. So that's why I included this little bit on the slide. It does require, again, work from us to stay politically current events up to date. And that's exhausting because it's always changing. But again, I share that with people. When it comes to how we get to use forms, pronouns, changing names, access to care, here's the state of things. And it's not as bad as, who was it, Idaho right now, as Texas, as those, but it's not as great as even Illinois, but Washington, Oregon. So kind of helping people see where they're at, helping those kids Again, there's another layer, of course, when I work with adults, that's considered legally independent. We work with kids, and we have to have that parent level, the guardian level come into it. Again, that political, those rights, those freedoms, blah, blah, blah. But again, knowing that, I should have put it on there too, just knowing the state of Wisconsin's Supreme Court general political makeup can also help people. Again, you don't need to share your political ideology. You don't need to convince kids to do one thing or another when they're old enough to vote, but you can also help them decatastrophize. You can help them put it into perspective. Again, developmentally appropriate, 10-year-olds versus 15-year-olds versus 17, that kind of stuff. But, they don't always know things because they're not always as connected, engaged, whatever, and we can be. And so we can help put that perspective in there. And that's kind of where we're at in Wisconsin. Again, I don't want to speak for any politicians. I don't want to bludgeon you with my political leaning, but to kind of be direct and frank with that, and then to help that be something you work with youth on. I kind of put this in here, but to rehash a couple of things that didn't come directly from the question we were talking about. You are going to hear people talk about the gender affirming. And there's some links I can give later too. I have them on here. It was so huge. I'm like, what a terrible link. There is a lifespan approach to this. Again, developmental, contextual, other identities, access to different means and resources that go into how we meet someone where they're at. Now, again, you're not the therapist, you're not the endocrinologist, but you are the teacher, the person in the school, the helper, and you're part of this lifespan. You're part of this context. So this can help you gain some language. Again, you don't have to read this stuff for homework. You just have to maybe orient yourself, get some of that was probably the hardest part of my presentation today, was how much do I want to dig into something and how much do I want to give things, and how don't want to bore you with stuff that you don't care about. I also don't want to just have 7 slides of have fun reading tomorrow. So I want to talk about it a bit. I want to give you these for future, and again, load you up with when you need something, you know where to go to kind of think about it and look at it, kind of thing. And again, it goes back to that collaborative consent, that collaborative, we're not letting 10-year-olds do things that 10-year-olds don't do anyways. We're not letting 18-year-olds do things that 18-year-olds shouldn't, whatever. It doesn't mean that by affirming that we are not accountable, that there's not, again, a contextual reality to this kind of stuff. And the flip side is because we're not in this place of prove, show, adversarial orientation, the affirmingness is the acknowledgement, is the validation, is the seeing them, even though there might be some realities of not yet, not now, not feasible. The seeing and being recognized is huge. And I think we all know this from various research, from various things you've heard. It just takes that one person, you, to see somebody, and that is the resilience they need to change that trajectory of their life, of their anxiety spiral, of their isolation, of their, takes one meaningful person to have that person know they're cared for, they matter, they're seen, they're validated. And that's how you can do it in this gender diversity, trans subpopulation, without being like, oh yeah, we change your name every 5 days and we do all this, and we no, it doesn't mean you have to do what's not feasible, but you also get to affirm at that basic level. And that goes a long way for that overall health and wellness of those kids and youth that we work with. Any other thoughts, questions about some of these things? Not that anyone has to on some of these links. During my time exploring this, learning this, becoming somewhat more expert, at least in my mental health role with this, you're going to see these in these links. One of them is, again, this gender affirming lifespan approach. University of Minnesota, there's like a national center or institute for gender health and sexual something that I'm forgetting the acronym. Really cool. I'm talking, if you're a school counselor, this could be some stuff that you go, well, I can even use some resources. If you're somebody who just wants to educate your staff on, again, different ways to hook people into this collaborative consent affirming approach, they're fantastic. So I give the link for a specific thing, that affirming lifespan approach, but click around. It's all free. The people are actually that run it. I talk to them way more than I probably should. Should probably pay them at this point. But they're fantastic, and it's a resource that is online accessible, and really friendly, really nice people, really useful for that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think someone wrote like sharing with parents and these kind of things. Yep. Um, and then what do I have next here? Oh yeah, some things to think about. Move your faces around. Um, Here in the Marshfield Clinic, not that all of you are coming in a place that can use the Marshfield Clinic, but a lot of places. I just use this because I know ours specifically. A lot of healthcare systems do have some um, formal gender services, whatever that means, medically affirming, mental health, team-based stuff. In the Marshfield Clinic, it's called the GAP program, gender affirmation program. I recently gave a grand rounds. That was just a stupid example I put in there. The other part, my role as psychologist, but I put that in there not because you need to care what I do. Maybe you develop your role as a director, your role as a counselor, your role as a librarian. I don't know who's with me exactly. Start to build your list and how you know what's in your scope and what is your ability to find resources, and then what is outside, and where you refer, and how I use refer again, sorry, how you network and how you leverage this stuff to help those people and those kids that you're with. I did put a link on here. The DHS website is like surprisingly good. Like I was like, wow, this is like not bad. And then there's some, again, politically, there was that whole thing about like indoctrinating teachers to teach kids about kindergartners about what. No, if you dig into it, if anyone wants the link, it was like so not a problem. It's just blown out of proportion. Because when it first happened and it first became public, I was like, what is going on? Nope. It was so just completely wrong. But at the flip side, it's a decent website, and there's some good resources that are statewide or school specific and things. I'm like, wow. Again, health services by county and things like that. I was like, this is surprisingly reasonable considering how hot button this can be. So yeah, I want to save time for any specific questions. I can review other things. Like I said, I can go into lots more depth. I didn't know a lot of how the flow would work, so I did err on less, which might have been a mistake, but whatever. I didn't want to run into 30 seconds and what are the 40 questions you have. So yeah, we got a good 20 minutes or so. They want to have anything they want me to review again, stuff that's on their minds. Uh, uh, I think the question we had before was wonderful. If there's anything like that we want to dig into deeper, yeah, I invite you to do that now.
I thought the part about like being biologically, chromosomally, all of that, like how much of that is on a spectrum, I think really stood out to me because I think that is a scientific, research-based way to give like undisputable facts to parents. Like, nope, this is the way chromosomes and these things work. So if this is how it works there's a reason that children are expressing themselves in certain ways. And it also helps with, like when parents, I think it's a very similar crowd of parents that have issues with LGBTQ plus and parents that have issues with special needs and the amount of like growth in that population. So I think in the
Right.
area of like special needs, there is research to back up a lot of things. There's the children's like IEPs and all the data and all of that information. So this biological sex piece kind of offers that same approach of like scientific based knowledge to make a
It's
point.
which is I think a very fascinating. Again, I use the word intersection or combination. Again, gender expression and then whatever biological. Again, we use the word sex are not equivalent. And again, not that you have to. I'm reading a really good book. Very cool title. I don't like their sub. It's called Before We Were Trans, and then it says the new history of gender identity. I don't like the word new in there, but that's just a personal thing. But the person goes through historical that gender expression is like super socially constructed. Like, what does it mean to be female? What does it mean to be male? Again, we use that word because we don't have better words in English. But at one point, males did certain things and females did, and those flipped. The idea, I mean, think of stereotype stuff, right? Who has what jobs? Who has what roles? Those things have changed 10 times in a century, let alone human existence, right? But biological sex is something that's a little more chromosomal, hormonal, tangible, and incredibly diverse. So when someone goes, no, I know what cells are, not that you have to be the biologist on the cutting edge, but you go, wait a minute. If you have and now here's the critical question, if there's a willingness to listen and talk, it will go both ways. But if someone truly has somewhat of an openness to learning, this can really go up and go, oh, now I don't have to feel so, again, I use the word attack, but so insecure about something I thought was true. It's still true, and there's more to it. Chromosomally, hormonally, whatever that is. Again, that's the I think the lynch point is the linchpin. If someone actually is in good faith engaging in a conversation, easier said than done to figure that out. Are they there just to be annoying, to be what do you call that online? It's sea lining, where all you are is yeah, but like you're not really engaged, but you're just there to cause trouble, like a troll, I guess, online. Or are they actually going, look, I want to make sure we're on the same page. And this is a little bit of some of that concrete evidence. Now, again, if we were to be talking about how we change people's hearts and minds, data is not the best way to do that. Because if that was the case, people would have lots of different opinions on things. We're not wonderful creatures at looking data in the face and changing our beliefs. In fact, we kind of do the opposite. But this is at least something to use as foundation of evidence-based, research and data. So, and not to be too personal, but I always know, yeah, I'm wrong, but I'm not going to say I'm wrong. I'm just going to pretend it was something else, and then act like I wasn't wrong. Like I'm a psychologist who still struggles at changing his beliefs. Like it's a human thing. Unfortunately, when it comes to kids, when it comes to youth needs, the vulnerabilities generally, and then gender and these things that are difficult, it just amplifies all of that. So anything else from anybody that looking at again, talking any examples, there's things they'd want a little help with thinking through?
Hi there, my name's Ashley. I am calling from a group child center, and I guess the question would be, we have an individual who's 3 who was born male and associates as female, and the parents are in line with that. My question, I guess, is the sensitivity around staff. So we have our full-time staff who are all aware of this and can respect the wishes, but I also, I'm part of a university, so I have 60 students that work for us. So just how to relay that to whom it needs to be relayed to respectfully, so everybody, it's like that balance, right? Like when you identify a difference, then you are segregating that difference, and I don't want to do that. I just want everybody to be respectful of the situation, but also not caught off guard, when they may be not aware of this and take that particular child to the bathroom.
Right, right. Well, yeah, exactly. I think they're not to make it so concrete, but I think that's probably if you're hearing something about how I generally engage and in my role as a helper, as a psychologist, the concepts are beautiful, and then the concreteness is really where that gets into practice. So these regular staff, and then the people you have there that are more part-time volunteering, whatever. The idea is like, so what would happen? Having the kid go to the bathroom, be changed, the toileting needs that come with childcare center, right? And so there's where you're probably going to want to actually start with, what is the policy we have? What do we do? How does everyone know and follow that? What's appropriate across the board? And then is there anything specific to this child, aside from, it sounds like it's more of like how they're engaging and expressing, but at the end of the day, they just need to go to the bathroom. Like they need to go to the bathroom and be clean and like learn how to go to the bathroom on their own, presumably because they're 3 and they're probably figuring that out. And so like, it's just one of those cool things because there's a difference, diversity. It does have us hopefully have a productive question of what is our general policy. Well, maybe we should have a better policy for all of our kiddos that are learning this stuff, and that way we've actually improved everybody without singling them out. I don't know. I mean, again, I'm always fascinated. I have a little boy who's 4, and if it wasn't for daycare, he would not be potty trained. We went to it pretty quick, but me and mom were pretty I don't know, lazy's too mean, but we were like, we're tired. Here's a diaper. And so daycare was huge, but it's hilarious. I walked downstairs and the bathroom is right there. And they got that like door that's like a half door. And half the time there's like a kid in there just like going to the bathroom. And it's to me cute and funny. But you're gonna go, whoa, what does this mean? How do we privacy? How do we learn? How do we not make it a big deal, but also, that kind of stuff. And so, honestly, I'm like, in the future, we probably shouldn't put that bathroom right by the door that every parent walks into for all sorts of reasons. That has nothing to do with a gender diverse identity. So that kind of stuff probably comes up. Is there anything that you're anticipating would be a problem or would be worrisome? Again, I'm glad that you're conscientious and you're thoughtful, but is this something that is a worry that has not happened, or has this been happening and you don't know what to do?
Well, so I only know the child and refer to the child as their name or she, and that's how I've been introduced to the child. So it's easy cognitively for me to respect that. We have plenty of staff here who knew the child last year. I just started in the summer, so I haven't been here a full cycle, who knew the child when the child identified as a male, dressed as a male. So for them, it's that hard switch in their brain, and they have at pickup mentioned to the parents and used the wrong pronoun, and then the parents are upset that the staff
Yeah.
aren't respecting that, but like aren't able to kind of come on board with that. And I don't think anybody's doing it maliciously. It's just them being able to follow with the transition, knowing the child.
And this is one of those things, I didn't harp on it a lot, but as we're talking about pronouns and names and transitioning and changes and fluidity, this is a specific example, but it applies generally. Malicious is one thing, but we're all probably going to make mistakes. Generally, we're not perfect. So again, your role as someone who has oversight over employees to help talk about what it means to do by policy and not be malicious, but the rest of us are going to totally screw up. Generally, I have a ton of clients right now who I am very unintentionally misgendering with pronouns. I totally know they're non-binary, what I'm thinking of, and they do present, at least I do telehealth to them, they present what looks to me, just my own stimulus interpretation, as more male. So I'll fall into a phrase of something like guy, masculine, whatever, but we've been working together so long, they really don't care. And then I brought it back up and we said, oh, okay. So again, it's that intersection. If you can tell the parents that this is a work in progress, if you can tell the staff, this is always hard, but I'm sure there's been examples where a child wants to be called not a different name, but they were called Sam last year, now they want to be called Samuel, and you're going, wait a minute. Again, that's kind of easier because Sam and Samuel feels the same, but it's still a change. It's like, wait, no, they don't like. They want to be. They're a little dude, and they want to be called Samuel for some personal reason, and you got to go with that. So there's where I think the non-shameful, the acknowledgement, and then there's a work in progress, and then you let your parents know that this is kind of how you orient your center, and then that it's about kindness and intention, and perfection comes probably never, but being pretty good, we'll get there. We'll get there. And again, you're not going to bludgeon the parent. In the back of your heads, you're probably like, this is a 3-year-old. They might transition the other way too again. And so it's a work in, now and you can tell your staff, like, we got to be mindful and present. And, our role here is to not get in the way. And this could change a lot for this little person. And so we're here just to kind of support them on that basic level. But otherwise, we're going to do our best. And then, your kid is safe and they're fed and you come pick them up, and that's what's important here. We're really not going out of our way to cause a problem. Now, again, if you identify that from a staff, then you have an individual staff, resolution of performance improvement needs and that kind of stuff. But I am sure that happens in these ways. And I really want to hammer home the conscientiousness, the thoughtfulness is what matters. The perfection is pretty unreasonable for us in this role. I forget people's names sometimes, okay, because I'm busy and I'm tired. I'm like, I don't know who. Oh, and I look at the chart and thank God I have a chart, right? But like, come on, like we're just imperfect. No one, and if we're doing this in good faith and we have these, what you might need to do is have some training, minimal, don't burden anybody. Have some written policies. Tell parents what you're, again, where you're coming from in terms of how you orient your center and where your mission and values are, and then you do your best and you help people learn by joining these things, by working together, by doing that kind of stuff. So any other thoughts or questions specifically to what's going on with you all? Sorry, Ashley, that was anything more specific?
That's okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And this is something that was on my brain. Again, I didn't have a slide of it, but considering people here are talking about their roles, a childcare center, a director of a Boy and Girls Club, we have teachers, we have whoever's here. I do think then, of course, there's a challenge. I'm assuming, and I'm making this assumption, so I'm calling it out. I'm assuming that people who have joined today are the allies, advocates, accomplices idea. And you're a teacher, you're a director, you're a whoever. And so there can be this, or this is what happens to me. There can be this dissonance where it's like, I want to improve. I want to go out there and make this huge change, this huge, I don't want to quite say social justice because now that's been a negative term too, but I want to be this, I want to do this. And I have to remember my role from 9 to 5 is this. And so I'm not saying you have to like not go on Facebook and like not have a pride flag in your front yard, because I do that. But it's okay to go, my role here is to do what's required in a healthy, non-harmful way. And maybe then when I'm off the clock, or if I want to have a different sphere, I do other things. So you don't have to also begin. It's not all or nothing. It's not black and white for you all in this. It's finding that space and that area that works for your professional role and then for your personal, which again is where we started. If you watch those clips from that professor from University of Austin, again, the personal professional is there, and that's how we carry that. Which goes back to, for me, why I work with this group, why I train with these things, why I present some information, because to me that's a way to influence a societal systemic thing, not just dealing with the person in front of me who we're working on doing repair, healing, and individual focused things. So again, I can appreciate that at times we're going to feel that tension that conflict, and then being thoughtful and intentional with how we keep that boundary, how we separate ourselves, how we have limits in one area and are more direct or indirect in another area. It doesn't mean that you have to censor or you have to be all in all the time. Hey, not only am I going to do this, I'm going to tell every parent, I'm going to make them call me. No, you don't have to pick all those battles all the time. Your roles have multifaceted, and you get to be intentional so you don't burn out, so you don't feel like you have no, and you also don't feel like you have no power and influence, because you do. And I think that's the bottom line, is that what you do with the students, the youth that you work with, makes a huge difference. And it does turn their lives in different trajectories and helps overcome, repair, and help them, grow into their best selves. This being, one small area of what they bring into our lives that we can work with. So yeah, I don't have too many other thoughts. I was able to babble along here with questions until almost the time. If there's anything else, I'll answer them, or we can kind of be done. So anything left from you guys? There's one, right? You guys. That's a gendered word. Whatever. I'm from Wisconsin. We say you guys. If
That's a
someone else
Wisconsin word, yeah.
right? If someone else gets upset with me, I don't freak out. I go, oh yeah, I get it. I've been trying to use the word folks more. I'm not always great at that. Today I acknowledged it because that's the topic area. Sometimes I totally whiff on it. And again, being yourself and being someone who cares is what shines through. And again, no one's perfect. We all can work with each other, and it tends to go in a useful way.
Jacob, I appreciate your message, and I've appreciated being here today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions for Dr. Dieselman? Okay, in the chat, I did put some information about WOSTA, our email and our website. So those of you who have joined us before, we are the Wisconsin After School Network 1. We are in the middle of changing our name to a Wisconsin Out of School Time Alliance. So do not get confused. There was information that came out about that, but that is where the name changed. So I did put that in the chat for all of you. Everything will be available to you as well. So we'll send out those links that he went through and any other information. But we just want to extend our gratitude one more time, Dr. Dieselman, for being here today, as well as all of you. Thank you for the work you do on behalf of the children and families in the state of Wisconsin. We hope that you have opportunities in the upcoming week to utilize some of these strategies and share these messages with other youth professionals. So thank you for joining us. We'll stay on for a little bit longer if you have questions. Otherwise, have a great day.
Yes, thank you all.